Well, hey there. So I get a lot of questions about my background, my education, and what I do for a living, amongst other things. You'll have to wait on the story about the eye. So I thought I'd give you just a quick rundown on a quick background and a quick tour of what it is I actually do for a living. Hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. My name is Peter and this good looking fellow here is Geordie, and we live together on a classic wooden motor cruiser in Victoria, British Columbia, all the while fixing it up for some pretty extensive cruising. If that's the sort of thing you might be interested in, why don't you consider sticking around and subscribing? We'd love to have you. Right, Pop, let's go. Yes, puppy boy. Well, hey there, if you'd like your very own Travels with Geordie t-shirt, just stick around to the end of the episode and we'll show you how you can win one. Okay, so let's do this really quick. I was born in London, England in 1962 to Canadian parents who were there on an extended honeymoon. Kind of bohemians. Anyway, my parents promptly moved back to Canada and I grew up in Montreal. And I'd have to say I had an excellent childhood. My parents really didn't pay much attention to me, although they were very kind to me. I was more like a boarder in the house, but as a result, I didn't get much parenting, but that's okay. Went to a pretty good school, met some really great people, had what I would say a great childhood until my parents broke up when I was about 14, and my mother followed a guy to Calgary, Alberta. Needless to say, I wasn't too thrilled about that. Sorry to all you Calgarians. Anyway, as a result, I didn't go to school very much, and I wasn't being particularly responsible. I got a couple of jobs, I got a couple of cars. Oh, in Calgary, you get your driver's license at 14. But fortunately, the guy my mother was hanging out with turned out to be a bit of a turd, and we promptly moved to Victoria, British Columbia, here to Victoria, can you believe it? And ended up living on a sailboat in this very marina, where I live now. A long time ago. Pretty cool. I went to Victoria High, but I didn't go to school there very much either, and in fact eventually I dropped out. Sort of. More on that in a minute. But really, it wasn't long before living in a 21-foot sailboat with your mother had pretty much run its course. So I hopped in a 1956 Dodge Fargo pickup truck, which I just love that truck, and drove across the country to Nova Scotia, where I had an opportunity to work on a sheep farm. And so for the next couple of years, I spent my summers working on a sheep farm in Nova Scotia and spending the rest of my time living in a Volkswagen van throughout eastern Canada, mostly in Toronto, right downtown. In fact, I was one of the original van lifers. Cool, eh? So at 16, I was about as wayward as a 16-year-old can get, living in a Volkswagen van, vagabonding around eastern Canada. And my father, bless his soul, said, we got to do something about that. And he paid to put me in an architectural college in Montreal. The only thing I needed was a high school graduation certificate. Okay, here's the story. Yes, I pretty much dropped out of high school. Left Quebec without telling them I wasn't going to go the next year. And for some reason, they kept me enrolled, and when they had to try and figure out how to send diplomas out to everyone, they didn't have any marks for me. So I can just imagine them at the Régie de l'Éducation de Québec or whatever it is going, we have no marks for this guy, give him average marks. And they sent me a diploma with the best high school marks I ever got. So yes, I'm a high school graduate. Sort of. Anyway, that did allow me to get into Montreal Technical College for an 18-month accelerated, very, very intense architectural technology program, which was a feeder for the School of Architecture at McGill University. However, while I was there, the School of Architecture changed their entrance requirements and I was no longer eligible. I was actually accepted at Carleton, but something got in the way. And that something was computer-aided design, the acronym CAD, and what that means is drawing things with computers instead of on paper. I was trained on the drafting board with a pencil and a ruler and a straight edge. But when CAD came along, it changed everything, and I loved it. I fell in love with the technology. It was fantastic. I got right into it. And as a result, I was relatively valuable. So instead of going on to university, I became a CAD consultant to all the architectural firms in Montreal. Lots of them. I taught all kinds of people how to use CAD and made a reasonable amount of money doing it. Life is pretty good. Bought myself a little wooden house, fixed it up, renovated, awesome neighborhood, found a sweet girl, married her, had a couple of kids. Life was absolutely perfect. In short order, we outgrew our tiny little house, so we moved down to Nova Scotia and bought a big old farmhouse in a little fishing village. It was bliss. It was just perfect. The ideal place to raise kids, etc., etc. I loved it. The work I was doing at the time was mostly remote. I'd gotten into doing software development for the cemetery management. Can you believe it? I write software to manage cemeteries. Yeah, anyway, never mind all that. But what happened is, I found community, and for the first time in my life, I really felt like I was somewhere where I wanted to be involved in community, and I got very involved in community. I ended up being a reasonable sized employer. I started designing and building houses. I had 12 guys on the go. I was on the board of trade. I was in the choir. I was even going to open a pub. I'm sure some of you can see where this is going. Yep, my kids were getting to the age that they were going to be heading off to university, and I was busier than anything and not paying an awful lot of attention to my family. Long story short, I completely botched that, and in no time I was single. And I pretty much threw everything away, hopped in the Land Rover in the Airstream, and spent the next couple of years driving around America, I guess one might say trying to find myself, basically goofing off. And what I learned about myself was that I enjoy a much simpler lifestyle. I spent so long building equity and acquisitions, and now really I spend most of my energy trying to just make memories and friends. And that sounds pretty idealistic, and I know there's a lot of people spouting this these days, but it's just true. It's fantastic. And then for those of you who aren't aware of my long-term plans, first goal, drive around the world in a Land Rover. Yeah, pretty ambitious. Well, as far as you can go these days. And then take the boat on as much cruising as possible all over the world. It's not an ocean-going boat, so it's a coastal boat. So go by truck to the Great Lakes, where I can do what's called the Great Loop, and then by ship from Florida to Italy, where I'll spend forever cruising the European canals and the Mediterranean. And then when I'm too old and too feeble to do any of that, I'll buy a little English canal boat and end out my years tottering back and forth to the pub. Well, that begs the question, what are you going to do for a living, Peter? And well, frankly, I hadn't given it much thought, because for the longest time, I could pretty much earn fairly decent wage doing design and visualization and the cemetery software I was doing. However, the cemetery software dried up. Basically, I just couldn't continue to pursue it, and design and visualization isn't as mobile as you might think. And in fact, the visualization market is really drying up. And by visualization, I mean 3D animation and renderings of architectural design. Now, my main career has been doing this most of my life, really high-end visualization. However, the way the world is moving, there's an app for that. And just about anyone can do modest visualization with some simpler tools, SketchUp, etc. these days. And high-end visualization has mostly gone offshore, where people will work for nothing and you basically bid against. Anyway, I won't go into it. There's not much money left in it. So I kept thinking I'll continue to do design work, and I have been able to do a fair amount of it, but it's hard to do that completely mobile, which is what my goal is, because I want to be able to work from anywhere in the world. So of course, you can't have a discussion like this without at least once mentioning patrons. Well, I have a YouTube channel, and every YouTuber has this fantasy that they're going to live off or at least be substantially supported by patrons. And well, in time I'd like to think maybe I will. In the meantime, I have some very, very generous patrons, and I'm so grateful for you, but it's not a career. Not yet anyway. So if that isn't a segue into what I do for a living, I don't know what is. Let's show you. Okay then, so I am blessed aboard MV Geordie in that I have what I consider a massive forecastle. Forecastle is a concatenation of forward castle. It's a three-part concatenation. Are there any others in the English language? Anyway, it's massive. Now, some of you will remember having been down here before. It was originally a single berth both sides, and the doorway was centered. And I've moved it over to the starboard side, so eventually I can turn this into a double berth on this side. And this side I've completely hacked apart, and I have a temporary little nav station office, whatever, in here. And well, it's been like this for a year and a half. And it works great! I just love it. But this is a mock-up of what will be here eventually. And there's a head to forward, which I'm not going to open because it is packed, jammed full of junk. So what do we got going on the screen here? This is rendering of a really fun project I'm doing now, which I'll show you more about. It's basically, I have a client that's looking for a virtual model railway layout. So I spent most of the summer designing, laying out, and modeling in 3D, and now animating an actual model railway layout. It's fun as heck. In fact, I've spent way too much time on it because I can't possibly justify it for what the client's actually looking for, which is a few stills in a couple of clips. I'll show you. This has been a heck of a lot of fun. Basically, I got to build a model railway. And down at this end there's a town with a little rail yard that's yet to be developed, train station, some trestles and bridges over a lake, and some tunnels under a little mountain at the other end. Pretty standard semi-figure-8 small railway. But I got to build it all in 3D and fly around it and run my trains in it and build tiny little houses. And I mean, it's just been a heck of a lot of fun, building bridges and trestles, all the kinds of stuff I always wanted to do in a real model railway, but never ever had the chance. And I think, as I mentioned, as a result, I will never be able to charge enough to justify the amount of work I put into this, but it's been so much fun, it's perfectly worth it. Let's go on a train ride. Now this is a very preliminary full motion proof, but still it is kind of fun. Gosh, isn't that fun? I could just watch that all day. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Here's just some quick pictures of some of the houses I've designed and built. And I should be clear here. I am not an architect. I'm an architectural technologist. And the difference is an architectural technologist does not have training in design, aesthetic design. We only have training in construction design. However, I really enjoy aesthetic design and architectural design. And fortunately in Canada, you can design houses without being an architect, and I've been able to take advantage of that and really have enjoyed it. So here's a 3D model of a house I designed and built in Nova Scotia. You can see here there's a lot going on. This is a very busy model because it's fully modeled both inside and out. If you look carefully into this corner, you can actually see the kitchen in here, kitchen counters and such, and I can show you what that looks like on the inside. So this is just a good example of the complexity of a 3D model, even for a single house. You can imagine for larger projects this becomes an immense amount of stuff. Here's a few shots of that same house under construction. It was a really fun project, right on a cliff high over the Atlantic Ocean, as basically all the houses that I built out there were. It was a really fun place to work. And now, a few shots of the building finished, and it really turned out to be a nice house. Okay, here, I'll give you a little demo reel of some of my past work. Welcome to Beer of the Week. This week we're trying something from Postmark Brewing in Vancouver. They call it the Winter Warmer. I've never even heard of Postmark Brewing, but apparently it's one of the trendier little downtown Vancouver breweries, so we'll give this a shot. It's supposed to be robust, cozy, and strong. Well, we'll see what we think of that. I have no idea what color this is. I don't even know what type of beer it's supposed to be. Yeah, it comes out pretty dark. I like that. Nice golden color, very dark head. Interesting. Lots of it too, because my, excuse me, well, that is an awful lot of head. I'm not going to be able to drink this anytime soon. The glass was cold. The beer was cold. I poured it really badly. Well, We'll just check in a minute. Well, okay then, let's try that again. Another cold glass. This is definitely robust. It needs to be poured very, very gently. Even this one. I have never quite had such a problem pouring beer. It's going to be fabulous, I'm sure of it. Mind you, we're going to have to wait for this plane to take off first. I've made several attempts to scoop head off the top and pour more beer underneath. Here's my original one. This head does not settle anytime soon. So I'm going to taste it and see what I think of the winter warmer. I apologize. Well, it's a strong beer. It's just a strong beer. It's good. I like it. I didn't mention that it was discounted in the liquor store. Maybe it's because it's impossible to pour. Anyway, it's a nice beer if you can get it to pour. Not bad at all. Anyway, that gives me the opportunity, and I hope it doesn't devalue this gratitude at all with this slightly difficult beer. And I'd love to thank Jeff London and Mark Griffiths for coming aboard this week as new patrons. Thank you so much. So glad to have you, and we'll see you guys next week. It's okay. You just have to, yeah, it's okay. It's just plain old okay. Yeah.